This is the double cast on stitch, and I have threaded my needle and I have both strands knotted at the end, so I have 2 strands of thread going through. I am also using a milliner needle, so I want the long straight so that it slides through this stitch easily. We have done the cast on before, so this shouldn't be too terribly difficult. I'm bringing the needle out on the top of where I want one end of my stitch to be, and I'm going to separate that thread. It's easier to do it before I put the needle back down in. Then I'm going to take the needle down where I want the bottom of that stitch to be. I'm going to bring the needle back out partially where I first came up with my thread. And I'm going to leave the needle, oops, I got it up in more than one spot. I'm going to leave the needle sticking out part way, and then I'm going to do cast on stitches from both sides. So if you remember, cast on stitch is doing a loop which flips over, so it's crossed like that, and I'm going to put it on my needle. I'm going to pull it down all the way, snug it up. Then I'm going to switch to the other side and do the same thing, do a loop, put it on my needle, pull it down, and I just keep alternating back and forth. So I'm doing a loop that crosses over itself. So if I had my thread laying down, I'm looping it, the thread's coming back over the top of itself, then I'm turning it, it's easier to do than to show, and flipping it over the needle. So I should have it crossing over there when it goes on the needle. It's not just wrapping it around the needle. Flip a loop from the other side on the needle, and you may find it's easier to do loops with one hand or the other. Certainly the case for me. If I were using a fatter thread, I would fill up this area faster. So they're just going on and they're sliding down on the needle right tight up next to each other. I'm not leaving a bunch of space. And I want to fill up the needle enough that it's the same distance from here to here as it is from here to here. So I'm getting close. Yeah. You can push the needle through a little bit further. I just don't want it to come all the way out of the fabric. And that's looking pretty good. So once I have all the loops cast on that I want, I'm going to hold the thread there and I'm going to pull my needle through, and your edges may not be even, so you can pull on both sides. And then I'm going to lay it over this way and keep pulling, and it snugs down on the fabric, so it's just sitting right there on top of the fabric. Then I'm going to take my needle back through to the back of the fabric where I came up on my second time up. Okay, so to do that again, I'm going to bring my needle out at the top of where I want this to be, my stitch. So if I was making petals, this is my center, and these are my petals. I'm going to take the needle down at the other end of my petal, and then back up through the same hole where I came up on the top, or very close to it. I don't want to pull the needle all the way through. I'm going to leave it sitting there in the fabric. I'm going to separate my 2 threads, and it would have been easier, it is easier to do before you slide the needle in there, because that way it's not all twisted up. So redo that. Okay, so once my needle is partially up, then I start casting on loops, just like if I was knitting, from both sides though. Just alternating back and forth. And I'm pulling them down on the needle so that they're snug. So the reason you want a milliner needle for this stitch is because you're having to pull through all those loops, so you don't want the taper in your needle. The milliner needle is straighter. So I just keep casting on, and I could have counted on my last one if I was trying to make them all the same length. I'm not that into exactness. Oops. I don't want to catch the thread on the needle. I want it wrapped around the needle, not the point going through it. And when I have enough on the needle, it should be as long here as it is from here to here. I'm going to go ahead and hold on to those stitches on the needle and pull it through. And you may have to tug on one side or the other on your thread because we are running two different ones. And then I'm going to lay it over the space that I made where when I went down and came up with my needle, and finish pulling my threads through. Take it down pretty much at the same place where I came back up originally, and there's my next double cast on stitch. So you can just keep doing those if you want to make petals on a flower, and I think I'm going to make 5 of them probably. And then I could put a French knot or a colonial knot or something in the center. This stitch is used a lot in Brazilian embroidery.